My name is Susanne Ruth Raweh, and I was born in Bucharest on the 1st of July 1938. My parents came from different countries. My mother came from Vienna, Austria, and my dad came from Czernowitz, who at the time was part of Romania or whatever. And they met in Vienna. My father came from Prague. He was a doctor, and they married in 1934 in Vienna. And then when my father wanted to open his surgery in 1936, he was not allowed, being told that he was a foreigner. But even if the laws, the racial laws of German weren't yet in Austria, he wasn't allowed to open his surgery because he was a Jew. So he decided to go to Bucharest, and there he could open his surgery. And he also worked in the Jewish hospital. There was a little Jewish hospital in Bucharest. In 1939 started the war, and as we know, Poland was conquered by the Nazis. And Czernowitz, where his whole family lived, went first to the Romanians and then was occupied by the Russians, because we know that pact between Ribbentrop and Molotov just divided the east of Europe. So we were in Czernowitz living with my grandparents, and in 1942 we were taken by the Nazis to Transnistria. And all my parents, I went with my parents and my relatives, my uncle, my grandparents, remained in Bucharest. Now, I have few memories from my childhood. I have only flashbacks. The first flashback was a moment when we were taken to Transnistria, and I remember the crowd in the big place. And there was a marketplace, and there were all the Jews who were taken to Transnistria. I remember the train that took us there, and from Transnistria I have two small pictures, my staying in the rain and my mother trying to cover me. And the second one, we are in a big room, and it's morning, and somebody cries out, they are coming to take us. And really, lorries take us to the Bug, which divided Transnistria from Ukraine. And on the Bug, there were rafts. And we were told, that I knew afterwards from my father, we were told who wants to go with the Germans and who wants to stay with the Romanians, because Transnistria was under Romanian rule. And my father decided to go with the Germans, and we were taken to the first camp, which was called Ivangorod, and there we were in a big structure, and we slept on straw. This I remember. We had an outhouse, a latrine, where we did our needs, and we got very little to eat. And all the people, it means the people who decided to go with the Germans, were from Bukovina, and there were also very many Ukrainian Jews who knew only Ukrainian, and they knew Yiddish. My father, knowing both Ukrainian and Russian and Yiddish and German, he became also a translator for the Germans to the Jews, and from the Jews to the Germans. And also as a doctor, he had a privileged position, let's say. Anyway, at the beginning, my parents worked with all the others, and they were there to build the roads for the German army. The road, there were 4 roads who went into Russia, into the Soviet Union, and on one of these roads, our camp was positioned, and all the Jews worked on this road. And then one day, out of the blue, we were taken to the second camp, which was called Mihailovka, and there we stayed in an old school. We were about 400 or 500 people. In the second camp, we had a small room, and we had a privileged position, anew. My mother was in the kitchen. The commander of this camp, Dr. Alfred Grube, he was not an SS, he was not a Nazi, he was an engineer who built roads and bridges. And he behaved towards his slaves, because we were his slaves. We were not paid. We were given food and shelter. He behaved towards us very, very well. My mother, as I said, worked in the kitchen with other women. The products we got were fresh, and we had vegetables, and we had even meat, because my father was given an old horse, and he had to shoot the horse, and we had then the meat from the horse. And every week or every 10 days, the SS came and took from the camp the elderly, the children, and the sick. My father didn't have any drugs for his sick, so he just, I don't know what he did to keep them alive. And the elderly went, and the children went, and I don't remember any other child which stayed with me in the camp. I remember that I was always, when the SS were coming, and we knew it in the camp, I was put in a hole, and on me they put sacks with potatoes, and there was really, let's say, there was a silence of all the people. They didn't speak about us and about this child which was in the camp. One day, nobody knew that the SS were coming, and I just slept under a bed, and I was found, and I was taken to be killed. There were other Jews who were outside our camp, and I was there. My mother heard it from somebody that I was taken. She came after me, and the commander said, well, who is this little child? Now, I don't know if he knew about me or he didn't know about me. And my father said, it's mine. So he said, okay, Sipperstein, we'll speak about it afterwards, and with you zurück. And so I was saved by this person. I was told that Dr. Grube had a secretary. She was German, and her husband was Jewish, and that the SS killed her husband in front of her eyes, and she was taken, and Juden, noch was put on her breasts, and she was beaten and violated. And my father, after a few days, was called because she wanted to commit suicide. So he helped her, and he brought her back to life. This woman didn't want to go back to Germany anymore, and she stayed alive, and she came to Bucharest, and we met her in Bucharest. Then I remember we were in a small room, my father making himself an injection in the heart, and he had the sign till he died. He took typhoid fever from another camp because Dr. Raweh allowed him to go to other camps and to other ghettos to help with this typhoid fever, and probably he brought back this injection from there, so he could make himself his injection. It was already in the winter or 43, I don't remember dates, don't ask me about them, but it was after Stalingrad. It meant after Stalingrad fell, and the German army was just retiring and going back towards Poland and home. Dr. Raweh knew it, and he knew that on their way they'd destroy everything they found. So he took from our camp, he took about 80 people and sent us to another small camp where he knew the army wouldn't pass. So we came to this small camp, and we divided it with the sheep. So half of it were Jews, 80 Jews. On the other side there was a sheep, and we worked together, and we didn't have much cold because we had the sheep. One night, and this I remember, this is also part of my memories, a lorry stopped in front of our camp, and the responsible of the people went out, and she didn't come back. And my father, who was a very responsible person, said, well, what happened to the man? I don't remember his name. He went out, and after 10 minutes he came back and said, Mami, he said to my mother, Mami, mach dich fertig, wir gehen. What happened? My uncle in Czernowitz had promised a lot of money. He had promised this money to this Romanian officer, and this Romanian officer had a list of 10 Hungarian boys and us three, and my uncle knew that we were somewhere in Ukraine, and this man, this officer, just went and looked for these people, knowing that he'll get the money. So he found only 5 boys, and he found us. Can I say I was fortunate? Probably. And he took us. It was the 1st of November, 1940 something. And after 10 days, and this I knew afterwards, after 10 days, also this camp was completely annihilated. The man and the lorry went out of petrol, and he was desperate because he couldn't go back to Transnistria. So my father said, okay, let's go back to Mikhailovka, because there will be somebody who will give us the petrol. And really they went back, and Dr. Raweh gave him the petrol, and so the lorry could bring us to Transnistria. And we reached a place, Pechora, which was a former camp, but in the camp there were only a few Jews left because the German soldiers had already flown. They went away because they already heard the cannons, as Naftali said, the cannons of the Red Army. And we were there, and my father left us in Pechora, and he went to look for other Jews. We went to Tulchin. He found there a cousin of him, and in Tulchin I got sick. I had a high fever, and my mother told me, I didn't remember it, that I shouted, I don't want to stay with you, let me go with the orphans. Because at the time, orphans were already coming to Eretz Israel, and there were, to Israel, there were kinder transports. And so I shouted it, that's what my mother told me, as I said, and they decided, okay, they'll send this kleine Michigan with a kinder transport, and they put me on the lorry. My father came with me to Mogilev. He left me there with a cousin of his who was in the ghetto of Mogilev, and he went back to Tulchin. I went to Iași in Romania, and from there I went on a train who had to go to Constanța, and from Constanța the ship should have taken me to Eretz Israel. But here comes somebody whose name I can't remember. He stole me from the train, and the children went to Constanța, and their ship never arrived in Eretz Israel. It was one of the 3 ships which were bombarded either by the Germans or by the Russians. Nobody knows till now. I stayed in Iași in the hospital because, as I told you, I was sick. And then I came to this family, and after a time a person came and took me to Czernowitz. And I remember that it was the first time in my life that I felt a lot of fear, because the train was full of Germans, and I was afraid that they see that I'm a Jewish girl. So I came to Czernowitz, and I found my father at my uncle's home, and my mother stayed behind in Transnistria. My father knew she was there. He paid somebody, and he went to fetch her. She came to Czernowitz, and we stayed there for a year. My mother didn't want to leave the house. She was afraid that the Russians will take her to Siberia, which they really did with a lot of people. And after a year, the whole family, uncle, grandparents, and whatever, we came to Bucharest. And there we waited for the Aliyah for 12 years. I think it's very important, but we have to start with the teachers and not with the students, because the teachers don't study the Holocaust at the universities they go to. I had first of all to deal with the teachers in the different schools I visited, and I saw their ignorance, and many times also a lack of compassion, of understanding and goodwill. So really the teachers who come to Yad Vashem should be chosen as people of goodwill and of intelligent people of goodwill and of an open heart and open head. The children now are completely mixed up in Europe because of these waves of immigration, and the teachers mix the Holocaust with the immigrants. And they do such a bad work and such a horrible work that really the universities, and we see what happens in the different universities, but they have to teach about what Judaism really is, and as culture, as a way of life, and not as a religion. And so it's very difficult to uproot the prejudice that is coming back to life. You know, always was there, but it was dormant. It was asleep, and it's coming back very, very, very strongly. I'm awfully sorry. I worked in this field for more than 15 years, and I felt the pulse in Italy, but when I spoke with my correspondent in Germany, it was the same thing. People don't know who the Jews really are because they are so prejudiced. And I think that at the level of the universities, not only at the level of the universities, but also in the schools, they have to study and really to go into the real Judaism and to understand it, and to understand the people and why, what happened to them. And maybe it will come from the head, but I think that the heart must go with the head. And really only people who have at heart, you know, the destiny of the Jews can really give to the children, to the students, and then to the children, the real way to understand the Holocaust, what happened, and why it happened. They don't understand why it happened. They think it's the same thing that happens now to the migrants. And it's not the same thing. It's a completely different event in history. And so, really, the people must be chosen. I'm sorry to say, but not everybody can teach about Judaism. In our family, we didn't speak about the Holocaust because my parents didn't speak, and I didn't tell anything to my children. And at a certain moment, when my daughter had her children, she asked me to write something about it. She said, "If you didn't speak with us, at least speak with my children." And so I wrote in Hebrew all my flashbacks, and I gave it to her, and she read it to her children, and they didn't understand a thing. And she very wisely drew. It was the first time in her life and the last time in her life that she did the drawing. And then I was in Italy at the time, and she came to Italy and she said, "Mommy, we have to publish the book because this is a book for children." And so with a friend of mine, Ilan Schenfeld, who is a writer and a poet, we did the book. It also appeared in his publishing house. He had at the time his publishing house. And then I translated it into Romanian, into English, into French, German, Italian, oh, never mind. And then the children could identify. And what does it mean, identified? When I spoke to the children from 9 years on to 12, I asked them to draw. And in the moment they draw it at this age. It comes from a part of them which is not linked to the cognitive side. It's linked to the heart, to their creativity. And I had wonderful drawings, I had hundreds of drawings, and I had a very, very nice exhibition of these drawings. And then with the children who from 12 on to 18, I asked them to write 10 rows of what they thought. And it was very interesting, especially in one school, that when I did the final seminar about my teachings, many of them decided to become psychologists and social workers. And this was really a prize for me. I said, well, I did it. And so I found my correspondent in Germany through these things written by the later students. She is the grandchild of Dr. Grube, of our commandant, and she was born after he died. And she was very curious what he did on the East Front, because she was afraid that he was a criminal, and she couldn't rest. And so she saw on the internet that one of the pupils wrote, "Alevai shehayu arbe kamohu." How do you say it in English? Well, it's a pity that there weren't many as Dr. Grube during the Holocaust. And so she found me in 2019, and since then we are friends, and we wrote together the book, which is called Zwei Menschen, Il Ponte, which means the bridge, because what my father and her grandfather did, they bridged really from enemies, they became friends, and there was a very interesting relationship between them. Also after the war, I got also a present from him at my wedding, and we are now friends. We are on chats, and these chats, some of these chats also appear in this book, which I think it's a very modern book. It's a comics, and with our chats, there is also the chronology of the Second World War, of the Holocaust, and the chronology of our family. So I just covered all the aspects of the Holocaust. In the moment I went to work with the Holocaust survivors was the first thing which was optimistic, because I passed a therapy, so I know that it did me good. So I knew that it will help also the survivors who just kept silent for 40 years, because I started my work 40 years ago. When I was 40, now I am 86. And then when I went into schools, this was another step in optimism, because I said, okay, I don't teach the Jewish kids, I'm teaching the non-Jewish kids about the Holocaust. And in all my years I was in Italy, this was not so optimistic. I found only 5 people who really did the real work. The other ones were very superficial. Even if they went to Auschwitz, they came back. Oh, I have to show you the pictures. Have you seen it? All these shoes and all this. And it was horrible. And only 5 people went to all the seminars and came to Yad Vashem and went to the memorial in Paris, and went to the studies. There is a university where you can study about the Holocaust in Rome, and they went to Berlin. They covered everything just to really understand the problem. And I see the projects they are making now, because all of them, they call me every week. I have a call from them, and they tell me how difficult it is now to teach about the Holocaust in the schools. Now this is a very, very harsh moment for Europe in teaching the Holocaust, probably also in the States, but in Europe it's very difficult. And I hope they'll succeed with their projects, and they'll go into the schools, and they'll find there people who really want to know more. I'm very glad that I'm no more there, because it's no more for my age to struggle with these big problems, which are really bigger than myself. You know, the teachers who really want to do something, I see their struggle and their projects and what they want to do and how they want to do it. And it must be, you know, we Jews, we take it upon ourselves to do the work. Sorry, it should be the others who should do the work, not only we. And this is the real work. We will remember. I remember, you remember. But the others don't remember it because it was not their story. But if you really go into it and you understand the mentality and the culture of these people, maybe they get next or near to these people, and they understand not only their suffering and their position as victims, but as people, as real people, breathing and working and inventing and producing literature and producing technology. No, we are like the old Egyptians. No, dear, we have to be a people alive and kicking. And this they must understand. And a friend of mine, together with the association of the Israeli-Italian associations, now they give, they invite pupils to write something, and they offer them a travel to understand Israel and to see how we live and where we live. And they do a lot of wonderful things. Because really, I don't know, we have to invent new instruments to teach people to feel. Till now, we can teach them to think.